Okay, so hello everyone. From this video onwards, we are going to start a new chapter in Django, and that new chapter name is Django REST Framework. Okay, in short, we call it DRF, Django REST Framework. Okay, so what is Django REST Framework? We will discuss in detail each and everything, right? But before going to understand this Django REST framework, let me tell you first of all, this is one of the important technology as a Django developer. If you don't know the DRF, means you know 30 or 20% Django, right? If you include DRF in your Django, means you know around 90% Django, right? So this is most important as a Django developer, right? So what are the prerequisite to learn this Django REST framework? Okay, so let me write here prerequisite. So the prerequisites are nothing but you should be aware about Python. I mean, you should be very good at Python language. You should know each and every logic of Python. And you should know Django. Okay, means you should have knowledge of which framework? Django framework. Then only you can learn Django REST framework. Without this knowledge, you cannot continue with this Django REST framework. Okay, so these are the prerequisite, right? And there are some terminologies you should know before understanding this DRF, which is Django REST framework. So let me tell you what are the technologies you should know. The first thing is you should know DRF. Okay, if somebody asks you what is DRF, so what you will say? You will say DRF is nothing but Django REST framework. So basically it is what a framework, right? And there is one more thing. What is REST API? Okay, so let me tell you this DRF is the tool which through we can build the REST API, right? So what is REST API? We will understand the REST API later, but you should know REST API we build using DRF. Okay, so REST API is what basically it is a concept. Okay, REST API is a concept. Just try to understand in the small words. I will explain it in a much better way. You will get the clarity by the end of this session, right? And there is one more thing, like what DRF do is what Django REST framework do. So basically, DRF helps to helps to create REST API. Okay, we will understand what is REST API, what is DRF in more detail. But as of now, what you have to remember, DRF helps to create REST API. Okay, and the next thing is REST API. So what is REST API? So as of now, you can say REST API is what? This is what? Communication rules. REST API is nothing but communication rules. Okay, and what DRF do? DRF, basically DRF simplifies API development in Django. Right? Hope you're understanding these concepts. Okay, and there are some terminologies you should understand. Okay, let me tell you, if you only know the Django, so let me tell you, if you only know the Django, so see, for example, this is the person, right? So here is the person who know Django, right? And there is one more person there is one more person. Okay. So there is one more person, let's suppose, and this person know about Django and Django REST API. Okay. So this is the person who know only Django. The person have only Django knowledge, right? And this person have knowledge of Django plus REST API, right? So can you see the power? I mean, this person, if the person know only the Django, means this person do not have their hands and legs. The person who's not having leg and hands, like handicapped person, it is like a Django. So it has less control on development. But the person who knows about the Django and REST API, so means the person is having hands as well as legs. Okay, so means if you will learn the REST API along with Django, so you will get lot of opportunities in your career. Okay, so REST API, or we can say DRF, is one of the important technology. It is not a big technology, it is a small technology only. Okay, or like 5 6 concepts are there in the REST DRF. Okay, to understand, so we will understand them one by one. Okay, but before understanding this, before moving forward, let me tell you what are the terminologies you will listen so many time and that you have to remember. So the terminologies, okay, so what are the terminologies you should be aware about? Okay, let's suppose you should know about the API, what is API, and you should know what is web API. Okay, and sometimes people call it web service. Okay, what people call web services, web API or web services, both are same, right? And another thing is REST. Okay, so you will listen so many times REST. Okay, REST framework or REST. Okay, and there is one more technology which is like REST API. Okay, or sometimes people call it like REST, RESTful web API. Okay, or sometimes people call it RESTful web service. Okay, services. So these all the terms are similar: REST API, RESTful web API, or RESTful web services. These all the terms are similar, right? And there is one more term which is Django REST framework. Okay, so in short, what do we call it? We call it DRF. Okay, so you should be aware about this all the technologies. If somebody asks you like what is API, you must be able to answer. What is web API, you must be able to answer. What is REST, what is REST API, what is DRF, Django REST framework. Okay, so if you know these many things, so this is uh, good, this will be good for your knowledge. Okay, so let's try to understand what is API. Okay, let's try to understand what is API. Okay, so API is nothing but, we can say, API is what? Application programming interface. Okay, So API is what? Application Programming Interface. This is the full form of API, right? The main objective of API is to so what is the main objective of API? Like two applications can communicate with each other. Okay, two applications can communicate with each. Okay, so this is the goal of the API, right? And we can say API allows external agent to communicate, or we can say interchange, we can say integrate and exchange information, right? Like for example, let's suppose, let me show you some for example, there is book my show. Okay, book my show application. Okay, there is a book my show website. So just go here. Okay, so let's select the city. Let's suppose the city is, let's say, Hyderabad. Okay, let's suppose I'm selecting the movie. I'm telling you the concept of API basically. So let's select a movie. Just click on it. Okay, and let's try to book the ticket. Okay, I will click here. Okay, so Hindi 2D. Okay, today, and this is what, 11:30 show. Okay, so I want two tickets, right? So just click on selects, right? And I can select any seat, okay, based on my requirement. And there is a pay option. Which button is there? Pay button. So just click on pay button. Okay, so it is saying accept the terms and conditions. So I accepted, right? And it is saying enter the Gmail. So like apc@gmail.com, and mobile number, like I'm writing some fake mobile number. Okay, so just click on this. Okay, so I'm telling you the concept of API basically. So see, on this application, whenever we want to do the payment, okay, on this book my show, we are trying to do the payment. So for payment, what they are using, they are using different gateways, like UPI gateway is there, right now. So in the UPI, what they are using? Google Pay. So this Google Pay application belongs to book my show? No, it does not belong to book my show. So it belongs to what? It belongs to Google Pay, means Google. So but this book my show application, this book my show web application using the services of Google Pay. Okay, how they are communicating, how both applications are communicating? Like Google Pay is communicating to book my show. Okay, so how it is communicating? Through API. Okay, so let me write here API. Okay, so API is providing the feature for the payment. Okay, so when some features are not available in the particular application, that features we can take through the API. So this is what payment API, Google Pay payment API is there. Okay, net banking is there. So if the facilities which is not there in particular application, that feature, that application you can add on through the API. Let's suppose when we talk about Rapido or Uber. Okay, when we talk about Rapido or Uber, so there is a map. Okay, there is a map integrated in such applications. Okay, there is a map integrated to such applications. So that map is created by Rapido, or that map is created by Uber or Ola. That map is created by what? Created by Google, and they are using the Google facilities. Who are using the Google facility? Rapido, Uber, and one more is, we can say, Ola. So these are the applications are using the Google facilities. How they are using Google facilities? Google is giving their source code to them. No, Google is not giving their code base to these clients. What Google is giving? Google is giving API endpoints. Google is giving what? Data in the form of API, or we can say the feature of Google Map is provided through the API, and that is integrated in such applications. Okay, so for example, as you are seeing here, Google Pay. So Google Pay source code is not given to the Book My Show, but the what they have given one API, and that API is bringing the payment facility for the Book My Show. Right? Hope you are understanding this. Okay, so let's try to read it one more time. So what is this? Application API means application programming interface, right? The main objective of API is two application can communicate with each other. Two applications, like we have seen the example of Book My Show and Google. Okay, Google Pay application. These both are the two different platforms. Okay, Book My Show is different and Google Pay is different, but they are communicating to each other. How they are communicating to each other? Using the API. Using what? API. Right? So both are communicating through the API. For example, you are using WhatsApp, right? And on WhatsApp, you are playing YouTube video. Which video you are playing on WhatsApp? YouTube video, right? And how you are able to play the YouTube video on WhatsApp itself in a small window. So the YouTube features are coming to the WhatsApp. How the YouTube features facility provided to the WhatsApp using the API. Okay, so API is doing what? API providing communication between two different applications. Are you understanding? Hope everyone is understanding now. Okay, in short, what we can say? In short, we can say method method of communication between software components. Okay, so when you want to the communication between two or more than two software components, that is, we can provide it through the API. Okay, what are the examples? Examples are, okay, the examples are what? So examples are like Google Map API used by the other platforms. Okay. Second example is what? The second example is we can say Google Pay, or we can say Google Pay payment facilities provided to book my show web application through the Google Pay API, right? Right. So, for example, there is a weather application, weather API as well, right? So, whenever you want to check the weather, any city weather, so what you will do, you will not create the code to check the temperature or what's the weather. What you will do, you will use the weather API. Okay, so the features which you want to use in your website that you can take from the API, right? Okay, so let me give you last and final example of API to understand it more clearly. Okay, so everyone can understand it now. So for example, there is a Django application I have built. I have created one Django application. What is my application name? Let's suppose this is a Django application, right? So if this is the Django application, so who will build this Django application? Obviously, this application will be created by the Django developer. Django developer will create the Django application. Okay. So who is accessing my application? So let's suppose there is an end user, right? So end user want to access my application. So that is fine. End user can access our application. Okay. So there is no issue to access the application through the end user. Right? So end user can access the Django application, whatever application created by the Django developer. Now let's suppose tomorrow my application is accessed by the Java application. Okay, so Java application want to communicate to my Django application. Java application want to communicate to my application. So will it be possible? Will it possible? Like, can Java application communicate to my Django application? No. Why it cannot communicate? Because the code written in the Java which cannot communicate to the Python code, because in Django what we are writing Python code. So this communication will not happen. Okay, let's suppose there is an Android application or mobile application trying to access my application. Okay, means there one mobile application one mobile application is trying to access which application. Okay, so it is trying to access my Django application, right? So this type of communication is also not possible, because in the mobile application the code may be written in Java or Android or Kotlin, right? So the code base of this application is different, the code base of this application is different. Okay, so end user can only communicate, but what I want, my requirement is try to understand everyone now. So what is my requirement? My requirement is if there is a end user, so it should communicate to my Django application. That is correct, right? And if there is Java application, if there is Java application, so that should also communicate to my Django application. And if there is mobile application, so that mobile application is also able to communicate to my Django application. Or maybe mobile, after mobile application, let's suppose there are other uh, applications also want to interact my application, so they all can communicate all together. So how it is possible? What we can do? So what we will do, we will develop one API. What we will develop? We will develop one API, right? So we will develop the API. So who will develop this API? Django developer? No, Django developer will not develop this API, but API developer. Who will develop API? Developer will develop this API. So what will happen? So the communication between Django application and all these applications will be happen through this API. Okay, so this mobile application code is different, but it will communicate to the API. Okay, so it will also be able to communicate through the API. Okay, and this end user will also communicate through the API. Okay, so with the help of API, now the communication is possible, right? Now the communication is possible. Okay, so with the help of this API, my other applications, okay, so applications will be able to access my application, my Django application, right? With the help of this API, it allow other applications, other platforms to interact with my application, right? So that is why API development is important. I hope now it is clear. Okay. Okay, let's suppose if there is no API concept here, so the only end user will be able to communicate to this application. Java application won't be able to communicate, and mobile application will not be able to communicate. So the communication facility to the other platforms provided by the API to communicate the application, right? So let's see the next. Okay, so first one we have discussed about API. What is API? Second is Web API. The third one is REST, and the fourth one is RestAPI, and the fifth one is Django REST framework. Okay, so these are the five terminologies. Okay, you have to be strong in these all terminologies. Let's talk about the next one, the second one. Okay, so the second one is Web API. Okay, but before understanding this, let's understand the one note regarding the API. So what API provide? API basically provide interface of communication between the user and application. Okay, so the interface between user and application is nothing but API. Okay, so the interface between user and application is nothing but API. Okay, so the user can be human. It could be human user, okay, but not all the time human user, but it could be an Android app as well. Okay. User means the person using the application. So another application is also able, also can access our application, or maybe desktop. Desktop could be the user. Okay, through the desktop, like we can provide the communication. Human can also request to get our application, and Android application can also interact with our application. Desktop application can also interact with our application with this API interface. Alright. So now let's try to understand the web API. So what is web API? The interface of communication between the user and application over the web by using HTTP. Okay, hypertext transfer protocol is nothing but web API. Okay. So the interface of communication between user and application over the web by using HTTP is nothing but web API. Okay, if the communication is happening through this HTTP, so that is nothing but a web API. For example, let's talk about the weather application. So when we talk about the weather application, so let's suppose this is the weather application. Okay, so here one API is bringing the weather information. Okay, so all 10 days weather information is coming through the web API. Okay, so why we are calling it web API? Because that API is providing the services over the web. Okay, if it is a web, so you can see here HTTP is there. Okay, so using the HTTP, it is providing what facilities. The API which is providing the facilities over the web. Okay, that is nothing but web API. You can see here the interface of communication between the user and application over the web using HTTP. Okay, if it is on the web, so it will be using HTTP. So such type of services are nothing but web services or web API. Right? So let me give you an example so that you can clear it more. Okay, so let's suppose there is a Java application. Okay, and this Java application try to access the web application. Is it possible? The communication will be possible. So the communication will be failed. The communication will not be possible. Why? Because Java code is different and web application code is different. So in between there should be a web API. Okay. So this, with the help of this web API, Java application can be communicate to the web application. Okay, so this API is nothing but web API. Right. So note here one important point, which is, for example, whether application can communicate with weather API to get weather information. Okay, right. So if the web application asking the weather information, so the code base is not there on the weather application platform. So that weather data, it will be taken by the weather API. So a web application asking the weather data through the weather API. So that is nothing but that is an example of web application. Let me give you one more example so you can more relate it. For example, let me search here one website called Redbus. Okay, so let's click on Redbus. Okay, so for example, if I want to do the booking, like for example, I'm going Hyderabad to Bangalore. Okay, click on search bus. Okay, booking. Okay, let's just click on this. Okay, not able to load this page. Not sure. Okay, so let's suppose I'm clicking on login here. Okay, so what it is saying, it is showing me to log in through the Google. Login with what? Google. So is that Google platform? This is not the Google platform. What is it? Redbus. Okay, so Redbus is here. It is what? Web application, and this web application is using the facility of Google. How it is using the facility of the Google? Using the API. So who is using this Google facility? A website, a Redbus website. So if the a particular website using the facility through the API, so such type of API is nothing but web API, right? So here Google is nothing but a web API. So it is saying you can share your Google account details and you can log in. Otherwise you can write your mobile number and only you can log in here. But here we have two options, right? So this feature is not created by the Redbus. Okay, Redbus people does not created this Google sign up facility, but this Google sign up facility provided by the Google itself, right? So such type of facility provided over the web is known as web API, right? I hope it is clear pretty much, right? After this we have another concept, another terminology, which is REST. Okay, so let's try to understand what is REST. Okay, so what is REST? REST is nothing but it is the concept to develop the API, right? Or we can say this is some rules which through under which we develop our application. I mean, we develop our API. Okay, so what is the full form of REST? Let's try to understand first. REST full form. So REST is nothing but REST means represent representation representational, right? Representational state transfer. Okay, so this is nothing but this is the full form of REST. Representational state transfer. Okay, so this is nothing but rules. REST gives some rules to build what? To build API. Okay, let me tell you, for example, whenever we want to develop the software, okay, so whenever we want to develop any software, so we have different software life cycles. Okay, we have different software life cycle. Like that is known as what? SDLC. SDLC. In SDLC, we have different life cycles. Okay, uh, different life cycle. Like first of all, what we do? We okay. So first of all, we gather the requirement. Then the second phase is analysis, and the third phase is design. The fourth one is code. Then fifth one is test, and after test, what is another? Then R stand for release, and M stand for maintenance. So whenever we develop any software in SDLC, so there are some life cycle of SDLC like requirement gathering, analysis, design, right? Code, test, release, and maintenance. And we have different types of model to what? We have different SDLC model, software development lifecycle model, to build the software, okay, based on our requirement. So we have like waterfall model, okay, and second we have prototype model. Third one is, let's suppose, increment model, and the fourth one, let's suppose, spiral model, and the fifth one is red model, okay, red rapid application prototype, okay, okay, rapid application design, and the sixth one is big bang model, and the seventh one we can say B model is there, and the eighth one we can say there is fish model, right? Nine one we can say there is agile model. So whenever companies want to design a quick software, then they follow the agile model, right? So what are they? Are they any software, or are they any library? So they are not libraries, they are not software, they are some rules. Okay, so if you are following the waterfall model, so certain rules you will follow, certain protocols you will follow. If you are using prototype model, so certain protocols or certain rules you will follow. So similarly, like this, similarly like we can say similarly this software development life cycle model, we have we have REST. REST is what? Representational state transfer. So these are nothing but rules to develop what? API. Okay, so I've given you example of SDLC. This is nothing but example. right? Okay, so we can say rest rest is an okay, so this should be capital. Rest is an architectural style. Okay, so rest is what? Architectural style for building what? For building the API. It define it defines several rules, guide, okay, several rules as well as guidelines to develop web APIs, okay, or we can say web services. The web APIs are also known as web services. Okay, so by using REST, we can develop web APIs in very easily and concise way, right? So if you want to create like web APIs or APIs in a concise and easy manner, so then you can follow this REST rules or REST concepts, whatever concepts given by the REST. So you can use this. Okay, otherwise if you will not using any particular rules while building some software or API, means it will take a lot of efforts and time to finish it, right? So for example, in software development, if you are not using SDLC lifecycle, so you may never know when your software will finish. Okay, if you are not following these phases and if you are not following any model, so means you are creating a software in very unprofessional way. So the professional way of building the software, you will follow any SDLC, okay, and you will keep in mind all these phases. Okay, if you are not doing requirement gathering, so you will not be able to do the analysis. If there is no good analysis, no good design. If there is no good design, there is no good code. If there is no good code, so there is no good test, and you will be not able to release, right? And maintenance will also make an issue. If you will not release, then what you will maintenance? So that is why it is important to follow some rules. So this is REST is nothing but guidelines, or we can say rules to build what? APIs, right? Okay, so next we have to understand what? The next we have to understand REST API. Okay, so we can copy this complete one. Okay, so now let's try to understand what is this REST API. So the REST API means the API which is we are building using the REST principle. Means while building the API, if you are following the REST principle, so that is nothing but REST API. Before the REST API, developer used to build API like SOAP-based API. There is one concept called SOAP-based API, but nowadays developers are building the API using REST. Okay, so can we build API without REST? Yes, we can build the API without REST concept. Okay, but it will be little uh, we can say unprofessional way to build the API without using any rule and concept. So we will try to build the API using the REST and without using REST. But yes, possible. It is possible to build the API without using the REST. Okay, so the meaning of it, the API which is built under this concept, under this rules, okay, under this architectural style or under this guidance guidelines and rules, so such type of APIs are known as REST API. Okay, so let's note some points here. The API which is developed by using the REST architectural style is nothing but REST REST API. Okay, or RESTful API. Okay, you can say RESTful API or REST API, or you can say RESTful Web API. Okay, both all are the same thing. Okay, REST API. One more thing, REST API. Okay, note here. REST is REST is basically architecture. REST is what architectures, or we can say concept. Whereas whereas RESTful API is an API that implements REST. Okay. So REST is basically architecture, whereas RESTful API is an API that implement REST rules. Okay, so now let's understand the fifth terminology, which is which one is Django REST framework. Okay, which is known as DRF. Right. So what is this Django REST framework? Basically, we can say this is the toolkit, okay, to build what web API. Where so whenever you want to build the web API, so you can use this Django REST framework toolkit. Here you will get the concepts of model views, okay, and ORM support you will get to build RESTful API. Okay, so in order to use this, in order to get this like Django REST framework, so you can search on the internet as well. You can search Django REST framework. Okay, so here you will see the official website of it. So you can click it and you can see how we can use. Okay, so installation. Okay, so everything is there. Okay, so how to install this? You will write pip install Django REST framework, right? And after that you will install this markdown as well as Django filters. Okay, and then what you can do, you can keep the REST framework in the installed application as we used to keep our application. Similarly, here we will configure this REST framework in installed application and see the endpoint is same. Okay, so like it is like creating the Django application. Okay, so DRF is a toolkit to build REST APIs. Right, so here you can see the quick start. Okay, so here we have concepts of. So so what I'm trying to say here, let's try to understand it. So the Django DRF is nothing but Django REST framework is nothing but Django REST framework is a powerful and flexible toolkit for building web APIs. Okay, it is the most commonly used framework in Python to build web APIs. This framework internally uses Django facilities like model, use templates, ORM, etc. Okay. So whatever the technology, whatever the facilities we use to develop the Django application, same we will use with Django REST framework, right? Okay, so let me give you one example as well. Okay, so let's suppose there are different people from different countries. Okay, and they want to communicate. Okay, so in communication, when they want to communicate, what they required, they need. Let's suppose all the people speak different languages. Okay, if all the peoples are speaking different languages, will they able to communicate each other? Are they able to understand each other communication words? No. So what we need, we required one common language. Okay, so we can say all these people required one common language to communicate each other. Okay, so that common language is nothing but REST API. The common language is what? API, right? So let me give you one more example. For example, example 2. This is example 1. But suppose we have different applications, like there is Java application, right? And there is one more application. Let's suppose this is .NET application, right? And we have another application, which is, let's suppose, Python application. Here we have another application, which is nothing but, let's suppose, SAP application, right? And these all the application want to communicate each other. So is it possible? See, the code of this application in written in which language? Java language. And the code of .NET language is written in C#. And this is the Python language. And this is a SAP application. So all the applications code base are different. So communication is not possible, right? So what they need in order to keep the communication in between, they need a common language, common software. So that common software is nothing but API. What is that? API, right? So with the help of this API, these all can communicate. Okay, so these all can communicate with the help of API. Okay, so this API provide a common language, right? So for this API, common language is what? So the common language for this API, which is nothing but the common language for this API. Okay, let me write. So they provide what? Common language, which is HTTP. Okay, so HTTP is what? A common language. So like for example, if there are people from different countries, so they cannot speak to each other, so they need a common language. Okay, so the common language for the different people, the common language is English. But when we are talking about software terms, so the common language is what? HTTP. Okay, so HTTP can be understood by the Java, can be understood by the .NET and SAP and Python as well, because this API follow one common language, which is HTTP, and one common message format. Okay, so that is what? JSON format. Okay, so they HTTP use one common message format, which is known as JSON. So this is what? Common message format, right? And before JSON, there was another common message format, which is known as XML, right? So but nowadays we are not using XML message format, but we are using JSON message format, right? Hope you're understanding. So this API provide what? One common language, which is HTTP, and one common message format, which is JSON, right? Okay, so now let me wind up by writing summary of whatever we have discussed. So API, we have discussed API. So API means like we can be used to access functionalities of any application. Okay. Through the API, we can used to access facilities or functionalities of any application. It may it may be stand alone app or web app or enterprise apps. Right. Now the next is web API. Right. So web API is nothing but we can use to access functionality of web application using HTTP. Okay, and then we have discussed about REST. Okay, so REST is what? Guideline for creating APIs, right? So it is an architecture which provides several guidelines to develop web APIs very easily and effectively, right? So next is RESTful API, right? So this RESTful API is what? The web API which implements REST principle is called as RESTful API, right? Then the next thing we have discussed, which is Django REST framework. Okay, so what is the Django REST framework? It provides toolkit to develop RESTful APIs for Django based applications. Very easy. Okay, so what does Django REST framework do? It provides toolkit to develop RESTful APIs. Okay, RESTful APIs, the APIs which are following the REST guidelines for Django based application. Okay, so REST API we are building for Django based application in very easy way using the Django REST framework. Okay, right. So the main objective of web APIs is interoperability. Interoperability is nothing but like we are providing the facilities from one application to another application. We are providing the communication between one application to another application, no matter what code base it is. Okay, and when we are using the web APIs, so we are using HTTP methods. Okay, so means, what does it means? It means different applications can be can communicate with each other irrespective of developed language and platform. Okay, so the common language we use, which is HTTP, common language. So what is the common language? HTTP. And the common message format, common message format, which is JSON format, right? Okay, so let's talk about web services. When we talk about web services, so there are two types of web services. Okay, so there are two types of different web services. Types of web services. In the type of web services, we have two types. One is SOAP based web services. Okay, and the second one is next one is RESTful web service. So what is this SOAP based web services? It means SOAP means we can say simple object access protocol, right? And another, so we can say SOAP is an XML based or accessing web services, right? So SOAP-based services uses what? XML message format, which take lot of bandwidth. Hence, it takes lot of time to deliver the data, right? But security-wise, it is good. But speed-wise, it is very not suitable. Okay, so if you want to see the XML format of data, you can see here. XML data format, and you can see how the data looks like in XML. So you can see here, this is how we create some elements, and in the elements we keep the data. So this is what XML format here is. Also you can see, so employee ID, right, and this employee details is there. Okay, so the second employee and the second employee details are there. So this is the XML format. And soap based services use what? XML format. But nowadays no one using XML format, but people use what? JSON format. So JSON format can be understood by each and everyone. I mean each and every application, because data in the form of objects, or we can say in the format of dictionary. Okay, so let me just click it here. Okay, so here you can see key value pair. Okay, so this is what list of objects. Okay, so this list of objects can be understood by everyone. So in the RESTful API, we keep the JSON format, right? So second service is what? RESTful web service. So before this, let's see the limitation of this, why we migrated to the uh, RESTful web services instead of SOAP based. As I already told you, the limitations are, so the limitation of SOAP based services are, the first one is, we can say SOAP based web services will always provide data only XML format. Parsing of this XML is very slow. Okay, parsing means converting the data from one platform to another platform, means one type to another type. So this is means parsing, right? For example, you are parsing integer data into string data. So that is what changing the type of the data. So it is very slow, which creates performance problems, right? So the performance will be slow due to delay in parsing, right? And the second limitation is transfer of XML. Okay, when we are transferring the XML data over the over network, so it required what's more bandwidth, required more bandwidth, right? Okay, so now let's understand the RESTful web services. So in the RESTful web services, we have like a few methods. We can say we have few HTTP methods, and the whole REST API concept revolves around this only. Okay, like for example, there is a CRUD operation. So in the CRUD operation, we have create, delete, read, update. So these all these four or five terminologies, CRUD operations are there. Similarly, REST API revolves resolve I mean revolves around some HTTP methods like get, post, put and patch. Next one is delete. So these all are the HTTP methods, right? So we can say most of the time RESTful web services will provide data in the form of JSON parsing. Okay. So the when data is in the JSON format, so parsing will be slow or fast. The parsing will be fast. So parsing is what? Parsing is not difficult. So parsing is not difficult means it will take less time. Hence, this type of web services are faster when compared to app services. Right? Okay. So one more advantage of RESTful API or RESTful web services, it takes less bandwidth. Okay, so we can say transfer of JSON data over network requires less bandwidth. So that is why RESTful API is far better than SOAP-based web services, right? So that's all for today. So we have discussed so many things. Okay, we have discussed all terminologies. We have started from here. Okay, we have discussed all these terminologies. From next lecture, we will create the projects. Okay, we'll create the API without REST, and then we will create the API with following the REST principle. Right? Okay, so thank you everyone for giving your valuable time. Okay. So if you have any doubt, any question, you may ask in the comment. Okay, so thank you guys for giving your valuable time. There is some mistake. Delete. Okay.